Welcome to Tucker Carlson. Today, famously, the three main requirements for life are food, water, shelter. We pay a lot of attention to the first two, and most of the time in this country ignore the third. Shelter, where you live, the buildings in which you spend your life. What are they like? What are they made of? How are they designed? Architecture matters far more than we acknowledge. It can elevate the human spirit. It can also crush it. And unfortunately, in the United States and much of the West, a lot of modern architecture appears to be designed to crush the human spirit. Mm-hmm. So when you find someone who's thinking about how to elevate humanity with the buildings that he designs, you want to talk to him. Andres Duany is one of those. He is a world-famous architect and urban planner, one of the people behind a brand new way of thinking about architecture called the New Urbanism, and we're very happy to have him in our studio right now. Mr. Duany, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks.
I appreciate it. So before you tell us, I'm interested in where you're from and where you got the ideas that you have now. But if you just summarize for people who are thinking, why are you doing a segment on architecture? Why does architecture matter, do you think?
Well, you know, at a very small level, for example, the height of this table bothers me. I mean,
me too.
It matters at this level.
I agree. It's bothered me since they put it in here. I completely agree.
So it bothers at this level. But as you get to the higher scale, the scale of course, the house is enormously important. So is your bedroom. But as you get to the level of town, the town plan, it really affects your life. For example, a kid that has to be driven everywhere is a kid with no freedom at all, you know?
Right.
And an older person that no longer can drive is a prisoner, highly isolated. So what we design are places that are walkable, above all walkable, where you can get to your daily needs by walking. You can have a car, but you don't have to use it. And I think what makes America pretty awful is that the car is mandatory.
Yes. If
you did not have a car, almost as an individual level, every individual has a car, you would literally starve to death in a couple of days, you know? And
we're so used to that we don't imagine there's an alternative.
And yet up to about 1950, before the cars were widespread, and before everyone essentially had one, every place, right across cultures, you needed your daily needs within walking distance. It was absolutely normal. The Romans did it, the Chinese did it, everybody did it. And then the car eradicated that discipline. And so now we are, what our group, the New Urbanists, are doing, and it's a movement, it's a very large and powerful movement, we're trying to restore the ability, the right to live without a car, the right to your daily needs, you know, without having to get in a vehicle that costs, by the way, over $10,000 a year just to own. And that's one of the secret numbers that makes housing unaffordable. You know, if we had $10,000 a year, we could pay a lot of mortgage with that amount.
That's right.
But every person, regardless of the income level, really has to have a car. So it's profoundly unfair. And we're addressing this.
Amazing. I want to unpack that at some length. But first, tell us how you got to a view like that, which is not a conventional view in this country at all. Where are you from, and how did it shape your understanding of towns?
Well, I'm Cuban, and probably more important than being Cuban is that Cuba, at the time that my family lived there, was quite American.
Yes.
You know, it was almost like a 51st state. And my grandfather was a developer, my father was a developer, so I grew up in that milieu. And then when we came to the United States, we stayed very little time, but then we moved to Spain, to Barcelona, where I could see what it was like as a essentially 13-year-old to have an entire city available to me as a child.
So what year did you move there, ish?
1963.
Okay. So Spain, in some ways, in 1963 was what we would almost call pre-modern. I mean, it's not the Barcelona of right now at all.
Not at all, no. The Barcelona right now is probably a lot nicer if you're a teenager or an adult, because there's a lot of partying. But if you were a child and we had the run of the town, of the city. We had the run of that city at 13. Just imagine that. And and it was so safe that we could stay up till midnight. So the entire city was available to me as a 13-year-old, and it's an absolutely unforgettable experience. And I suppose what we're doing now is yearning for that, or being able to offer that to other people again, you know? And that's what the New Urbanism is about. It's about making your ordinary daily needs accessible by foot or bicycle.
And that was true in Barcelona in 1963.
Absolutely. I think there were only 200,000 cars at the time. The license plates were 200,000. B8, 200,000. And most people didn't have a car, and so your ordinary daily needs, the groceries, even the movies, were within walking distance.
How does it affect?
Schools, certainly.
Right, it would have to be within walking distance. Yeah. So now it's considered almost like an obscure, unattainable luxury that your children would walk to school unaccompanied.
Yes, yes. I think that actually the places that do remain, that are walkable, actually become resorts. People say, I'll go to, even here where we are, there's a main street, and it's quite charming, but any place that, whether it's Santa Fe or Santa Barbara, or Miami Beach, the Art Deco district, or Nantucket, or the island in Michigan. It's so rare to have a walking experience that Disney has had to build one, which is their main street, and they charge for it.
That's such a smart point. So there's something in us that wants to live in a medieval village.
Medieval is a pretty high standard.
Why do you say that?
Oh my God, they knew what they were doing. Among other things, because it was built in very small increments, because there wasn't a lot of wealth. There wasn't, you couldn't do a block-long building with all that implies in terms of boredom. Every little tradesman would build a little 15-foot townhouse, so the urban fabric is incredibly rich. It's not just because it's old, it's just really varied because people had a lot of say, individuals had a lot of say. And now corporations, especially people who give loans, they have 6 minutes to look at your loan application. You'd better look like a standard stuff that I recognize. And one of the problems with the United States that is hideous is not that it's intentionally hideous, it's just the protocols that create it are that checklist that ultimately has to do with the financialization of loans. And so much has to be invested that they have to look at very short lists, and you have to check it.
What's on the list?
Oh, among other things, it's so normative now that they say, shopping centers have to be about 30,000 square feet. They have to have 2 national tenants and 35,000 cars driving in front. And you have to be open for 2 years, and it has to be four cars per 1,000. If that checks in, you get the loan. Well, that's dumb. It's very stupid. The ugliness that you see is not the result of intention, it's the result of a stupid underlying protocol. And what drives me crazy is the stupidity that's behind it.
So you believe that the overwhelming proliferation of ugliness, you see it everywhere, is not willful. It's not, no one is doing this on purpose.
No client walks into my office and says, I want something that is kind of ugly and just like I've seen it before. They come in with incredible aspirations. Like everybody, they're proud of what they build. Who wouldn't be? These are people who go to the hard work of building something and the risk. But the protocols, the zoning codes, the deadhead bureaucrats, the even deaderhead bankers with their checklists, they bring everything down to a very normative, even thing so they can be packaged by 200 and resold as financial instruments. So the houses that you see, those subdivisions, are ultimately designed backwards from financial instruments that fund them.
Why would you want bankers getting involved in design?
Because they have the money. What they do, the bankers take the mortgages and package them in increments of 200 so that they're bought by, let's say, the retirement funds. That increment of 200 mortgages or shopping centers or so forth has to be very normative, has to be very even and very, very repetitive so that they can be bought by huge quantity by the financial.
But can I just ask? Okay, so I understand all of that, but it kind of defies observable reality, common sense, because as you just said, Santa Barbara, Santa Fe, Mackinac Island in Michigan, Nantucket. These are places that you, once you see them, you don't forget them because they're just so great.
Right.
So why wouldn't some banker be, someone from J.P. Morgan be on Mackinac Island in Nantucket and say, you know what, let's build more of that.
That's exactly right. Okay, and those are the few brave souls that come to our office to get that kind of thing built. So what we actually do is based on those models. That's our specific, the new urbanists and our office actually designs places that are like the older places. And if you were to actually visit them, you would have a very difficult time believing that they weren't from that period.
But why wouldn't, and God bless you for doing that, and it's why I'm so excited to meet you, but I just can't help but wonder, it's such an obviously good idea.
And they sell for so much more.
That's exactly right.
Oh, exactly. They behave just like Santa Barbara financially. They behave just like Santa Barbara, just like Nantucket, just like Mackinac Island. They outperform all the comparables. But the problem is that actually technically they're illegal. Like the codes don't allow them, the traffic engineers don't allow them. So our clients, the clients who build these things, the developers who do, are actually heroes. They're like Sisyphus. They roll the boulder uphill against a system that doesn't, it's inadvertently, it's illegal. Look, everything about this road right here in front outside, everything about Mackinac Island, everything about Nantucket couldn't be built today reading the existing code. There is this complete disjunction between what the codes expect and the places we love.
That is grotesque.
Grotesque. No. Yes.
Okay, so I have so many questions for you. But let's just go back 10 minutes to your goal, which is to create places that are pleasing to people and that reconnect people through walking.
Yes.
I love that. What is the life, how different is a person's life experience when he's able to walk to the things he needs? Like, how does it change your life?
Well, unlike if you were to visit a place, you would actually visually say, God, this looks right to me.
Yes.
And you take your family and the kids would say, damn, it was just really nice. But if you were to stay in one of our towns, in one of our, let's say, Florida resorts, with your children and they could experience for 2 or 3 days what it's like to have that freedom, they could never go back. Okay, so unlike architecture in which you can walk in or look at a photograph
I'm going to ask you to pause. You made reference to one of the towns you built. This is one right here,
that's
Seaside,
that's
Fort Walton Beach.
Seaside. That's one of our first, Mm-hmm.
Okay, just so our viewers know what you're talking about.
There's a town center, there's a town square there, and there are houses behind it, and live-work units, and mixed-use buildings, and it's full of kids, and the kids force their parents to come back.
Okay, so the first thing I notice about this is it's not all the same.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Small increment developers. We actually set it up, so instead of having one big developer build everything, and one architect design everything, we set up protocols so that smaller developers and young architects can do individual buildings, just like the old days. And we bear the brunt of that because we have to convince the loan officers, and we have to convince the code people, and we have to convince the traffic engineers to let us do it. It requires variances for everything. The reason it's worth it is that actually it sells for much more, so the developers actually get an upside.
Ah, that's so. I noticed there's common green space, like a college, right?
Right, and the kids gamble there. And on the left, do you see those buildings on the left, all three lined up in a row? That's a school. That's an elementary school. See it on the left, right there?
Yeah.
Yep. And there are offices above, and those are live-work units in the square in the center. And just off the screen, there's a chapel, and it's all there. And you can leave if you want. I mean, there's a grocery store, everything. I mean, you can get in the car. We don't prevent you from having a car. We just don't force you to use it. So you have the choice of walking.
Yeah, that's the other thing. That looks European to me because it's not designed around parking.
Yes. Well, it is actually an American model. It has enough parking, but it's not necessarily convenient. The problem is, it's not that parking is a good thing. It's just that you can't sort of stumble out of your bedroom into your car or stumble out of the shop into your car, because then you'll always take the car. So sometimes the cars are far away. You have to walk to your car. But then, we found that actually people who settled in there, they would use the car 3 times a week. And in suburbia, each household uses their car 11 times a day.
A day?
A day, yes. The engineers calculate car trips 11 a day per standard American house. A suburban house.
I don't think I've been in a car in 2 weeks.
I know, because you live in a.
I'm happy not to get into a car.
But you live in a traditional town. That's why.
Yeah, no, I know. Yeah. That's why I live there. But it doesn't seem like. So we now associate what used to be universal just with rich people because, as you know, you pay a premium to live the way people live.
Right, and we get blamed for that. We say, and they say, well, that's very expensive now. I said, yes, but it wasn't at the beginning. What drove it up was scarcity and desirability. Now, I know perfectly how to keep the prices low. Okay, I know exactly how to do it. You do really ugly architecture with the cars all over the place. Believe me, the prices stay low.
Right. Build a housing project. It's cheap.
Build a housing project, they don't go up in value. That's a solution for gentrification. Make sure it's ugly. But if you do something well, of course it's going to be bid up.
So what does it do to people's lives, to their brains, to their relationships to live in a town like that as opposed to a conventional
Well, the
town?
ones who don't, particularly as they get older, isolation, social isolation, being sad and alone is actually, I think, one of the government organizations has now basically defined it as an illness.
Of course
social
it is.
isolation is amazingly, it's a horrible thing. And the kids can't go anywhere without being driven by their parents, hence the soccer mom. Remember the
Right.
famous soccer mom?
Yeah.
That's just a chauffeur for a child that can't go anywhere.
Who's in the
to their
back seat
friends.
on his phone. Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
And by the way, then the houses also provide inside social isolation as well, but that's another story. Like sometimes the moms say, I want to drive my child, it's the only time I see them. There's all this dysfunction at every level. But what we provide is the alternative, and we have a group of literally 3,500 members, of which 1,200, they're called New Urbanists, and we gather once a year. We're in our 30th meeting, and we involve architects, planners, engineers, developers, retail experts. Everybody who builds these towns now knows how to do it again. We didn't originally, okay? We didn't. The art was lost. It was lost for 30, 40 years. But now we know how to do it. And what's driving it now, it used to be driven by the market. People loved it. Now, just paradoxical, with climate change, they say, oh, you guys lowered tailpipe emissions. Oh my God, you're part of the green movement. So now we actually bridge politics.
Well, that's fine. If you can harness the energy from, there's a lot of
both
destruction in the name of that, but if you can build something beautiful and pro-human, then I'm for it.
Well, what happens is that actually you never change the appliance. It depends who you're talking to, right? You don't change the appliance. It's the walkable mixed-use town. You just change the plug that connects to the power grid.
Exactly.
It's like you have one of these. I've got my Apple here, but I got 6 plugs when I change country. And I say, okay, I'm speaking to some Tea Party. No problem. Put that plug in, talk to them. And we talk to somebody else who's an environmentalist. And you just change the plug. You say, oh, this is all about tailpipe emissions. Or in this one, you say, no, this is all about actually wonderful public space where your children can be socialized with their friends. It connects everywhere because it's the fundamental human habitat. It's just so easy to connect to everything.
What mesmerizes me about this is that everybody wants what you're describing, right? Everybody wants it.
Yeah.
And this is supposedly a market economy where people over time get what they want.
Very good point.
But they're not getting what they want.
No.
They're being denied it consistently for like 100 years.
The market is not a level playing field, okay? For a developer, the easy thing to do is to make a housing subdivision somewhere, a shopping center somewhere else, an office park a third place, and then the school a third place. And it has all the increments of a traditional town, but they're separated and reconnected by the private automobile. It's all there. It's all constantly being built, but the omelet is never made. It's like in the morning you say, the cheese is here, the eggs are there, now eat them separately, and this is the pile of salt. Good luck. No, what we do is we take this stuff that's being built anyway. It's all being built. Shops are being built, workplaces are being built, houses, townhouses are being built, and we reassemble them into a town.
Oh, look at that. I'm sorry to interrupt you. So this is something else you've designed.
They're all over.
Hendrick Farm, Old Chelsea, Canada. So what are we looking at here?
This is, one of the axioms is that we don't want to homogenize the world the way suburban sprawl does.
Thank you.
And so
Wait, is this all new construction, by the way?
It's all new, yeah.
Oh, every building in that picture is new.
Everything you'll ever see there is all new, and probably within the last 15 years. But what happens is we take the local DNA and we exchange the codes that make everything normal. Like we change the codes that make McMansions. By the way, a bureaucrat, you can never tell a bureaucrat, get rid of your codes, because they get rid of their job.
That's their power.
That's their power. So we say, okay, you're administering suburban sprawl. It's not very nice. They agree it's not very nice. They say, well, why don't we administer this, a traditional Canadian town, and you still have your job. So what we do is we exchange the codes from the suburban code sprawl to the DNA of traditional Canadian or Californian or Floridian.
I cannot believe that is newly built.
Well, look at the other stuff. It's all newly built, and it's absolutely charming. And by the way, we just enable this. Then we invite local architects and local developers to build it, because it's all about the small increment. It's about enabling the small tradesman, the small contractor. Because right now, everything forces you to very large. You're knocking out all the small tradesmen. They can't participate in a big block,
That's right. In a box store world.
They can't, but they can make a living at 6 houses a year. Everybody used to. That's how we built America. Builders at 6 houses a year.
I just love this. So it seems like coronavirus could potentially accelerate this, because everyone is working from home.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's a big opportunity for your vision, isn't it?
Well, it has reminded people that streets can be pleasant, and not just for cars. As you know, the sidewalks are now full of cafes. It has reminded people, actually, interestingly, that you meet socially outside your house. So, for example, the porches, instead of being just ornamental, become where you gather with your friends without bringing them indoors, which is less healthy. But you know what the coolest thing is? The conversion of the garages into workplaces.
Yes.
They're like lofts. They're like, oh, I have a loft at home. Get rid of the car, and you make, so now the houses we're designing have garages that are actually designed as workplaces, which incidentally, the bankers say, oh, you have 2 cars. Yes, sir, here's 2 cars, give me the loan. It's not really for cars. It's a live-work unit, which of course would frighten the banker, would frighten the loan officer. Like, what do you mean a live-work unit? We don't have any of these. He says, no, that's a garage. Oh, thank you, here's my loan. So
interesting.
You always have to be, to build these things, you have to be very cunning. And I'm very impressed by developers, because when you switch on their cunning, they're really very smart people. They just never asked to do anything except process bureaucratic stuff.
So I'm so mad at reflexively. I want to imprison the developers for building dollar stores.
Yeah.
But you were saying off air. I hope you can.
But a dollar store is a small department store, which could be downtown, if you had it downtown.
No, that's a good point. I'm not against the idea of a dollar store. I'm against the aesthetic effect of a dollar store.
Out there in the middle of nowhere,
right.
Full of parking lot. But for example, this little main street here you have here, the dollar store ain't that big. It could fit here, and you could go there and get all your stuff. A dollar store just sells normal stuff.
No, that's a totally fair point.
I want a twist tie. Let's go to the dollar store.
Yeah.
Yeah. I need a tag for my dog. Let's go to the dollar store. But the problem is that it's out in suburbia. It's not the type. The type, what the dollar store sells, obviously, is necessary for society. It's just the wrong place. It's in the wrong place. It's surrounded by parking in the middle of nowhere.
Smart. And because it's by itself, it has such a deadening effect on your soul.
And there's another thing that's interesting, which is, okay, we can cure everything, but there's something cursed about the way we do things. Do you know where the dollar stores look really bad?
Where?
It's on purpose. Because if you do something that looks really good, Americans often think you're overpaying.
That's totally true.
It's
totally
scientific.
It's scientific. Well, of course. I mean, that was the idea of warehouse shopping.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Right. Absolutely.
Sam's Club, it's in a warehouse. It's got exposed beams. It's obviously a good deal.
CVS doesn't have to look that bad, but or Walmart. Why do they have such lousy shelves? Because if you have good shelves, which they can readily afford, people think you're overpaying. And this is known. So it's something called price point, and you calculate downwards. You don't want to frighten people into thinking they're overpaying. So that's an additional thing. Okay, the fact that the dollar store is in a stupid place, we understand. The fact that if the dollar store really look classy, it may not attract people, that's another separate problem.
Oh, that's fascinating.
It's a separate problem, and it often is this.
What is your view on home size?
Well, I live and have lived in 45 years, for 45 years, in a 1,700 square foot house.
That's about the size of my house. I live in the same. That's exactly. No garage, 3 bedrooms. That's how I live.
3 bedroom, 3 bath, everything. Happy as it can be. But the problem is that the way things work out.
But so why do you do that? You obviously could afford to live in a bigger house if you wanted.
It's a 1927 house. It's completely delightful. It's cross-ventilated. Everything's right about it. I've never envied another house. Can you believe it? I've never envied.
Really?
I'm so lucky. Yeah, I've never envied a house. But anyway, what happens is this. Zoning, the evil code I refer to continually, tops the number of units you can build. Let's say you can only build 100 houses. Okay. If you build houses for $1,600, you can only charge $150 per square foot, and you only make $10,000. But if you build a house that's 3,000 square feet, charging at $150, you can make $15,000. So because of the topping out of the number of houses, developers are forced to build larger houses because it's more profitable. Yes, it's weird. It's a weird, inadvertent thing. What we do now is we write codes that say, look, it's just...
So the rapid expansion of the average American newly built home is not a response to consumer demand.
The developers, well, you always train the consumer, as you know. Like
Right,
the
good
realtors
point.
bring you in and they say, here's your family room, and here's your media room, and here's your breakfast room, and here's your dining room, and here's the kids' playroom, and they train you to expect it. So now it does eventually become media demand.
Yes.
It does, okay? But rationally, you don't need it. And there's a whole market that doesn't need it and this is what they tell you too. It says, they say, I only need 2 bedrooms. You know what they'll tell you? Well, then you can't resell it. Because everybody else wants 4 bedrooms, you see. So they have all these tricks to make you want it. But in the end, a larger house is more profitable than a smaller house. You simply make more money as a developer. And so it forces everything to bloat. It's all this inadvertent stuff. When you write rules, as you know very well.
Oh, I'm sorry. They're starting up. Our producer just put up another.
Oh, that's a wonderful. That's a chapel in one. And this is a town in
love
Florida.
that.
Yeah, and the thing about these things, they throw off enough wealth to actually build things like chapels and schools. America in the 19th century housed 30 million penniless immigrants. You know that, without any government help.
Yeah.
Because urbanism, development creates so much wealth that within 15 years, these raw Western towns were building opera houses.
Yes, literally.
And museums and beautiful town halls on their own nickel. So we do these things here. For example, that chapel, which is also a meeting hall, was built with the wealth created by that urbanism. It's the old way of creating wealth. Now it's stripped. It's stripped by the system. And now, by the way, affordable housing now has to be subsidized. It's ridiculous. We built America without subsidized housing. You know why? Because we allowed people, for example, to rent their basement or to build a triple-decker in Boston so you could live in one and rent 2. There were all these methods by which everybody became a little developer. Everybody became a rentier. The French.
Of course, yes.
The whole rebuilding of Paris by Haussmann in the 19th century, the way it was achieved, it was rebuilt like lightning in 20 years, is every middle-class person could become a rentier. Because the buildings were small enough that every middle-class family could build their office, their apartment building, which was large enough to rent 5 apartments. So on top of it, they not only made every middle-class person a developer, they put every middle-class person into business, and it created the affordable housing all in one shot, in small increment development.
Very smart. And the product was remarkable.
And this is what we used to do.
They've built nothing like that in Paris since the war that I've ever seen.
No, they haven't. And but it lasted a long time. It took a long time before that dissipated. But look, the immigrants came here and they would go to Milwaukee and build a Polish basement. What's a Polish basement? Is you basically, instead of putting the basement underground, also if you go to Savannah, you can see it. Instead of putting the basement underground, you raised it above, you lived at the second floor, and you rented the first floor. that was called a Polish basement, which is a raised thing, gave you a unit. And then there was the outbuilding. You can see every building in Williamsburg has outbuildings, dependencies that you could rent. And the triple decker in Boston, they allowed you to build 3 flats.
Yeah, all throughout New England. Yeah.
That's how we did it. You know, we housed millions of penniless immigrants. And now we can't house people with money. We can't even house the middle class. We can't house people with master's degrees. It's so distorted. And once you understand it, you know, I said at the beginning, I said the problem is not ugliness, it's the stupidity that's behind the ugliness.
The system itself produces these outcomes.
Completely.
So let me just ask, back to the house size. I'm interested in this because you spent your life thinking about it and spaces. Why do you prefer, again, as someone who could live in a big house, to live in a 1,700 square foot house?
There are a couple of things. One is that, well, the reason the house is small, it has everything, but only one of it. Right. Good point. Instead of 3 places to eat, you know, and 3 places to gather socially. It has a living room, a dining room, a kitchen. So once you get down to 1 each, that takes off 1,000 square feet right there.
Yeah.
Then the other thing is, because my house was built before air conditioning, they took the exterior seriously. The outside space was serious. It wasn't just, oh, this is a little balcony 3 feet wide. No, it's a serious space. And so Liz and I spend a lot of our time outdoors, and they bothered to make it really private. So when I'm outdoors, I'm not overlooked by 6 neighbors.
Yes.
In the backyard, which, by the way, our system is so stupid that in order to avoid the 6 neighbors, you have to have a very large lot to get privacy. My house is on a 50 by 100 foot lot. But it's a courtyard house, you know, like you mentioned Santa Barbara.
That's how I live. That's exactly right.
And so it's cunning. The architecture keeps it private. I don't need more land because my neighbors can't see in.
That's exactly, I live on a 1/3 of an acre in a courtyard. That's exactly right.
Like that, right. And that was normal.
So, but yes, it was. I mean, and people sort of had to think this stuff through in a way that they don't
Well,
now.
they didn't have money to waste.
Right.
You know, when we were poor, which we were as a nation, we had to be smart. There was no slack. There was no money to waste, so we had to think it through. Now, everybody wants to give you the big mortgage. Everybody wants the deal. They make fees on every banker makes a fee on the loan, so they want to give you the bigger loan, and so everything gets bigger. And it's because we have an excess of, and literally an excess of money that has to be invested at a very high clip. And so it forces everything to get bigger and dumber. We had to be so cunning do you know that the Mormons in 50 years built 730 new towns and villages without a penny? The Mormon epic going southwest into the desert.
Yes.
Between Brigham Young, when Brigham Young took over, he was a genius. He was actually the Henry Ford of urbanism. He just made it. And so before it was the nation, before it was American, they went south and west, and they built by 1900 they had built 730 new towns and villages without a penny. They were immigrants that couldn't even afford covered wagons. They came over with wheelbarrows to cross the desert. That's how poor they were. And it was an amazing thing that we could do when we were smart. Our models are always not the rearview mirror of what just happened or what sold well. Our models, we always look back at the last time that we knew what we were doing. Now, that could be 1950, it could be yesterday. Sometimes we know what we're doing. But often it's 150 years ago or 200 years. It's all there. The DNA is all there.
What do we have now in a conventional American house or town that we really probably shouldn't have, that has not improved our lives?
Well, cars are fine.
Yeah.
I'm actually a car guy. Okay, I love cars.
Seriously?
Sports cars, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Wait, now you tell us 40 minutes.
I love cars, but I don't want a car. I don't want a car as a prosthetic device just to go get milk.
Right. No.
I want the car just like the ads. You know, in the coast of California.
Yeah, of course. You're driving up to Big Sur,
exactly.
right? The convertible.
I want the cars with me beautifully dressed and my beautiful wife just stepping out in a cobbled courtyard. It's just like the ads. I just don't want the ad to go to 7-Eleven. Okay, the car. Okay, so we do like cars. We don't like the parking lots. Okay, what we can do without is the enormous number of hideous parking lots. Often buildings aren't ugly, it's the parking lot that's ugly. I read the other day, just a couple of days ago, that every car in America has 8 parking spaces. Yes. Well, there's the one at home, the one at work, the one for the Friday before Thanksgiving, the one of the Friday before Christmas, which is it's always for the maximum. Yes, there's millions of unused parking spaces in America. And by the way, with the collapse of big box retail, which is happening, that is the best real estate for the 21st century. All those parking lots are usually pretty well located, and they're ready to go for the rebuilding of the suburbs. All those parking lots could become the future town centers. They're located on big intersections. The shopping malls.
What a cool idea. No.
The dead malls are already located in excellent intersections. They're already denatured, so the environmentalists can't come and get you and complain because nature's gone. They're drained, they're paved, they're compacted, and they're permitted. We take those parking lots, this is one of the new initiatives of the new urbanism, we take those parking lots and reassemble them into mixed-use, walkable town centers. That's the big play now, is how do we retrofit suburbia with the town centers it never had?
Has that begun to happen?
Yes,
anywhere?
it has. Yes, it's begun. Yes.
Because there are a lot of dead malls.
Yes. Yes. And you know how you find them? You just look up Sears.
Right. No.
It comes up. Google Sears. You don't even have to leave your office to find the real estate. Yeah.
Interesting.
But that is really when people say, what's next? Well, 2 things are next. One is the rediscovery of outdoor space thanks to COVID. The fact that you design a balcony not to be ornamental, but a serious place to be. Okay.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. A really nice balcony, a really nice loggia. Okay. Yes.
Well, really nice what?
Loggia. That's just a square balcony, actually.
Okay.
That's inserted into the building. It's a room that happens to be outdoors, but it looks like a room like this one, but it's outdoors.
Interesting.
Yeah, a loggia is an Italian term for a balcony is cantilevered out, a loggia is inserted. Yeah. You see them.
So it's a recessed balcony.
It's recessed, so it's more private, but it's still outdoors. So you do your yoga outdoors, you poop your dog outdoors. I mean, they're wonderful. You do your weights outdoors. Those have disappeared, but they used to be normal. People were serious about balconies, and now they're just little ornamental little slivers of nothing. That has returned. The other thing that's returned is that COVID has brought us is the serious use of the street by people in cafes. As you know, they've taken over, particularly in New York, they've taken over huge chunks of the streets. The restaurant just said, I'm going out there. I don't care what you say, Mr. Traffic Engineer, I'm going out there. There's been a lot of rebellion, towards the recovery of open space. And that's been great with COVID. COVID's been good for urbanism, actually.
I believe it.
And being outdoors is healthy rather than getting in a car to go somewhere. People walk longer. So that was good for urbanism. But the main thing right now for the 21st century, when I meet a young developer in their 20s, I say, your play is buying dead malls and dead shopping centers and turning them into town centers.
That's just such a wonderful idea.
It's good news, isn't it?
It really is good news. It's wonderful news.
Yeah.
So give us a sense, just in closing, give two questions before I forget. So if you've made it this far into the conversation, I assume our viewers who are at this point are interested in what you're saying.
Yep.
How can they learn more about the new urbanism?
Well, they can Google CNU. We create a lot of CNU. We create a lot of tools that are freeware. For example, if you can't afford to get a whole code rewritten for your little town or village, we have model codes that don't necessarily dislodge the existing one. It just goes, it gets added to the existing code so that building walkable towns becomes legal. By the way, you can never dislodge the existing code because too many people are vested in it. That's something we've learned. They're vested in it. You can't just say, but you can say, okay, let's just level the playing field to let the market decide. What people don't understand is that the market is not a level playing field. You have to buy a house. You have to own 1 car per adult. There's no choice. There is no choice. An immigrant has to own a car. just to get a job, right?
Of course,
I mean,
and
so
they all do.
incredibly unfair. So the first thing is we have a whole series of highly crafted tools, freeware. And if you look at CNU, follow it through, and you'll see all the freeware is there. It's 30 years. And I have to emphasize, it's not about me, okay? There's 1,500 brilliant, well-intentioned people working all the time with passion, creating this stuff.
Oh.
And it's called The New Urbanism. And the books are good. They're written for every level. They're written for professionals. There are books that are written for regular folk. We wrote a book that is actually high school level, that has been, by the standards of urbanism, is a bestseller. It's called Suburban Nation. And we didn't have a high school person in mind. We had a regular American, frankly.
Standards have changed.
But actually it's been assigned in a lot of high schools. And that just tells you everything. That one is the story of how we got and how we recover in a very compelling way. And then there's a whole series of technical books for developers and technical books for engineers and technical books actually for bankers to see what, for example, there's a book called Gray Fields to Gold Fields, okay? A gray field is a parking lot. You've heard of brownfields, right?
Yes, of course.
Okay. Well, it's something called a gray field, which isn't polluted. It's just a parking lot, a dead parking lot. So you turn the gray field into gold fields. You get that book and you just pull out. My father was a developer. He said, the only thing you need to do to become a developer is to declare you're a developer.
Right.
It's not
I want to be a developer.
It's not a licensed profession. So get the book and get a parking lot and fix it. Everybody can do this.
Thank you for that. I do want to be a developer. You're giving. By the way, the one change in my attitudes after 50 minutes of talking to you is I'm slightly less anti-developer as I was going in.
Well, remember, they built America.
No, you're absolutely right.
America was built for profit.
You're of
in
course.
fact, the terrible stuff is uniformly built by government.
No, you're absolutely right. And by the way, to prove it, I just want to, if there's any doubt, I want to put up a picture of the FBI building at 9th and E or wherever it is in downtown Washington, D.C. By the way, this was built in the old part of downtown. This is the original downtown Washington, which was beautiful.
And it's up for demolition.
There it is. It is. I volunteer to...
They're all this stuff. By the way, of course, it's got its... People are nostalgic for that period.
Yeah.
It
was nostalgic for that period?
Yes, and
for brutalism?
But I'll tell you why. It's that America had not yet lost any wars.
Right.
We were the kings of the globe.
Right.
Those were the Kennedy years, and there was a kind of confidence, like a kind of screw you confidence. That's it. It's manifested in that.
No, it is, but there's also...
well, it's not human, you get it.
No, it's anti-human, and that, I'm pro-human, so that really bothers me.
Well, there's lots of problems with that, including the scale, but they're mostly falling apart. So,
right, they're badly made, too.
Yeah.
So let's end on a high note. Let me ask you, who's doing it?
That's not a high note.
No, it's not a high note. That's the nadir. But who's doing it right? You've been around the world. We didn't even get to your career, which is interesting. But you've been everywhere, and you've looked at how people live and how cities are designed. What are your favorite places in this country and elsewhere?
Well, I had the good fortune after college of convincing my father that living in Paris would teach me something. And I was 21, and it did teach me a great deal.
I bet.
And I learned technically how that was done, how Baron Haussmann and Napoleon III got that city that was and yielded. Not only did it become beautiful, but it also became healthy. He built the aqueducts, he built the schools, he built the metro. I mean, it's the whole package. So I learned that there.
It was a dirty city for 1,000 years.
Oh, you couldn't drink the water.
Oh no,
you died. So yes, it was a hellhole. So my favorite place is I try to be local. Like for example, when we work in a place, we're working right now in Montana. We have a team in Montana. It's a mountain area in Montana. It doesn't really have a name you would recognize. It's in the country. But what we do is we look at the local architecture, and for a month it becomes our favorite place on earth. You have to be empathetic, okay? You can't just say, I'm coming with my prior ideas and my prior aesthetic.
That's right.
You know, you have to be empathetic.
That's great advice for life, by the way.
Yes. You have to understand, and you have to sort of totally get into it. So you love the people, and you love what they love, and you love their food, and you love their cattle drives, and whatever it is that's going on. You love it for a month, and then you do a really good job. I'll never forget that we did a new town in Turkey called Kemer, outside of Istanbul, and of course, Istanbul's been destroyed by modern architecture pretty much.
Yeah.
And we just looked at the wonderful traditional architecture of Turkey, which is unbeatable, and we designed a town, and we showed the renderings, and people were in tears. Honestly, I remember the final presentation. These big, tough Turks were crying and says, "Thank you for returning our architecture to us."
Right, to us, exactly, to us.
So again, my favorite place is wherever I'm working.
So how would you describe, which says a lot, all good about you. I love your point about empathy. You know, you shouldn't, sameness is bad. Uniformity is bad. Diversity, individuality, unique things are good. What would you say, this is my last question, what would you say is the American architecture? There are probably many, but what's the first thing that comes to mind?
What I would say, you have to go, okay, what I am thinking of now is, one thing that's kind of odd. Because it takes 30 years to build a town, I'm actually a futurist automatically. When you ask me a question, I go, click 30 years from now.
Yes.
Because if I start now, it has to make sense 30 years from now. Okay, it's a weird distortion. Most people...
No, it's a realistic one,
for town planning, it's a very long time scale. So when I look at a 20-year-old, I think of a 50-year-old. Now, right now, I'm as much as they will bear, I'm inviting young people to lunch in groups of 2 or 3 to see what they're like. You know, the so-called Zoomers, the Generation Z. The Generation Z are closer to the pioneers with their mobility. The fact that they're people, there's a culture that came from England because it was a drag, and then they were in Boston and it was a drag because it was slummy and dark, and then they moved to Chicago and it was a drag, and then they moved to California, and then they moved to the Sun Belt. Now, it might have taken 3 generations to do that, but we're people who move.
Yes.
And the young people are incredibly mobile. They have very little allegiance, for example, to the people who they work for. You know, it's a mutual lack of.
Oh, yes.
I can lay you off, and but I can also I can quit. And so they're fascinated by mobility, and that's why you have this obsession with the tiny house. You must have heard about.
Oh, I've read a lot about it. Yeah.
Tiny houses are like little land yachts, and they love that. And of course, the virtual what COVID taught them. I know a kid that spent the year traveling the West while going to school at the University of Miami on the computer, and he loved it, and he's addicted to that now. And most of them are very mobile, and I'm trying to deal with what that is going to be like and turn it into a virtue. Like, will they gather and settle in? Well, for example, if you said me, what's my favorite place? Well, it might be Burning Man, for all you know, in which people come in for a week. Yes. There's an unbelievably sense of community, and then it dismantles. Now, when people are willing to use porta potties for a week, you know, and not bathe, there's got to be something extremely attractive. So for me, I have to look at Burning Man and say, what's the DNA there that needs to be reintroduced? I also have to look at what the Mormons did. I'm fascinated by the Mormon epic, how they actually colonized the desert that no one else wanted. Everybody wanted to be up north in the gold fields. Brigham Young took him south precisely because it was such a dry, desolate place that he never thought the United States would come get them.
Yeah.
He wanted to create a separate empire, Deseret, the separate empire. So he went south where no one wanted to be. And he created one of the most extraordinarily successful societies everywhere. Now, you can say, well, the Mormons are weird. No, I don't care. They did an absolutely brilliant job. I'm not ideological. What did they do that I need to learn? So I'm serious about learning from Burning Man and the Mormons and the Zoomers. And it's this eclectic thing that comes together.
Amazing.
That's my job.
Well, that was the most interesting conversation I've had in a long time. I appreciate your coming. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Andres Duany. Amazing. Tucker Carlson, name of the show. New episodes Monday, Wednesday, and Friday here on Fox Nation. We'll be back every weeknight relentlessly, 8 p.m. on the Fox News Channel.